100,000 Mongol horsemen are marching toward Delhi. It's the year 1299, and Alauddin Khalji, the Sultan of Delhi, faces the most feared army the world has ever seen. These steppe warriors have crushed kingdoms across Central Asia, and now one of their princes, Qutlugh Khwaja, has brought them to India's doorstep. Welcome to Heroic History, your daily history channel, where we uncover epic stories of ancient warfare every single day. If you love history as much as we do, hit subscribe so you never miss a battle. But today's story isn't about the Mongols, or even the Sultan himself. It's about one man, Zafar Khan, one of Alauddin's generals. Reckless, fearless, maybe even foolhardy, he made a charge that some chroniclers claim terrified the Mongols and shifted the fate of the campaign. What drove him to ride straight into the enemy lines? And could one man's courage really change the course of history? Let's find out. After assassinating his uncle and father-in-law, Alauddin Khalji, in July 1296, Alauddin Khalji moved fast to secure the Delhi Sultanate. He took the throne by force. But raw power wasn't enough. He needed legitimacy to build it. He handed out generous grants, supported religious institutions, and carefully balanced key positions between Mamluks, Alauddin's former appointees, and his own loyal officers. He also shored up his army, giving every soldier a hefty advance, reportedly a year-and-a-half's pay, to guarantee their loyalty and readiness. Even with these moves, Alauddin's control wasn't complete at first. In Punjab, he only ruled effectively east of the Ravi River. Lahore and areas further west faced frequent Mongol raids and Kohar uprisings, while Mulan remained under Alauddin's sons, who sheltered fugitives opposed to Alauddin. It wasn't until he sent trusted commanders like Ulu Khan and Zafar Khan that Mulan finally came securely under his control. Meanwhile, the Chagatai Kate, led by Duakan, was pressing south. Those ambitions went beyond raiding. They aimed to test or even conquer parts of northern India. In 1297-298, large Mongol forces struck Punjab, devastating villages, crossing rivers, and hitting frontier towns. These raids weakened the Sultanate's borders and probed Alauddin's strength. By 1299, Da's son, Qutlugh Khwaja, led a larger force toward Delhi. Unlike earlier raids, they didn't loot along the way, suggesting a serious attempt to see if Delhi could be taken and governed. The city's wealth, strategic importance, and symbolic value made it a prime target. Alauddin had been preparing his reforms, controlling prices, paying soldiers reliably, and reinforcing frontier forts created a strong base to face the Mongol threat. By the time Qutlugh Khwaja arrived, the stage was set. Alauddin's consolidation, Mongol boldness, and Delhi's high stakes were all coming together for a dramatic test of power. Our main sources shape how we see this. Ziauddin Barani, writing decades later, offers a moralizing, didactic view. He praises Alauddin as a strong ruler enforcing order while warning against disobedience, making his account more a guide to kingship than a neutral record. Amir Khusra, the court poet, gives a different but complementary perspective. His works celebrate victories and legitimize Kaghi rule, portraying the Sultan as divinely favored and often downplaying or ignoring any commanders who acted against royal orders. One of the clearest places these authorial choices matter is in the reported size of the Mongol force. Many traditional chronicles and some later histories quote figures like 100,000 or even 200,000 Mongol warriors marching on Delhi. Those numbers read well as stagecraft. A huge enemy makes Alauddin's resistance seem epic, but military historians treat such figures skeptically. Logistically and demographically, these figures are implausible for steppe armies operating that far from their supply bases. Modern studies and critical readings of the chronicles emphasize that such round, massive totals are likely rhetorical exaggeration rather than careful headcounts. In late 1299, The Chagatai Khanate under Da sent his son Qutlugh Khwaja on a determined campaign into Punjab, marching steadily toward Delhi. According to later sources and modern summaries of Tariq-e-Roz Shahi, this Mongol force was not in the mood for simple raiding. They aimed to conquer, not merely plunder. Unlike many earlier Mongol raids, this cohort avoided looting or sacking towns during the march, at least in significant ways, because they wanted to preserve strength and supplies for an ultimate showdown at or near Delhi. They skirted frontier forts and sought to minimize engagements with smaller forces sent by Alauddin from places like Mulan and Samana. Meanwhile, the Delhi Sultanate under Alauddin Khalji was not idle. Once the rumblings of the danger crossed the Indus, or at least became imminent, Alauddin set in motion a raft of preparations to defend his capital and the Sultanate's core. Chroniclers like Barani describe how Alauddin repaired and reinforced forts, especially along the northwestern frontier, and placed strong garrisons at Samana and Depalpur, which were key staging grounds on the path of Mongol advance in Delhi itself. Alauddin strengthened the capital's defenses. He repaired city walls, built up new fortifications, and took up strategic positions near his complex at Siri on the banks of the Yamuna River, which served as a kind of forward base before the walls of Old Delhi. He also invested in siege machines, stone slings, mangonels, and assembled stores of weapons, arms, horses, and supplies so that his army would be ready for action. Feeding a massive Mongol army so far from its steppe homeland was always a daunting task. The Mongols depended heavily on fresh grazing land for their horses, something abundant on the steppe but rare in the semi-arid plains of Punjab and northern India. As their supply lines stretched across swamps, rivers, and inhospitable terrain moving southward, securing fodder and forage became harder. Climate didn't help. Scorching heat, monsoon rains, and shifting river levels made travel slow and unpredictable. These natural hardships wore down mounts, slowed marching, and raised risk of disease. Alauddin Khalji understood all this, and he built defensive reforms around the enemy's logistic vulnerabilities. He fixed and regulated prices of foodstuffs, grain, pulses, etc., so that during wartime inflation could not jeest his people or starve his armies. The pay of soldiers was standardized. For maintaining one horse, a soldier received 234 toners annually. If he maintained 2 horses, he got an extra 78 tonkas. Elephants too were maintained both for war and psychological effect. He introduced rolls Julia marked or branded horses dag to prevent fraud, ensuring officers and troops could be accounted for. Market reforms meant that during crisis goods were available and affordable for both soldiers and civilians. Because of all these factors, distance, terrain, climate, the Sultanate's preparation, the Mongols couldn't risk trying to lay siege to Delhi. A prolonged siege meant committing to supply huge quantities of grain, fodder, water, and maintain camp hygiene in enemy land while being vulnerable to counterattacks. Delhi's fortifications, the Sultan's defensive posture, and the logistical peril of staying long in hostile territory made a siege a gamble the Mongols judged too risky. These defensive and administrative moves were not just military. They were social and economic campaigns meant to stabilize supply lines, prevent panic, and ensure that during siege or threat, Delhi would not collapse from within due to shortage of food or breakdown of civic order. Given the Mongol advance and Alauddin's visible preparations, the psychological stakes inside Delhi became extremely high. The chroniclers, especially Barani, say that once the Mongols encamped at Kili, just about 10 kilometers from Delhi's suburbs, word spread fast. Traders, pilgrims, ordinary citizens began to stream into the city, seeking protection behind its walls. Markets and mosques filled up. People tried to stock up on food, moving inward from the countryside. Commodity prices shot upward, with merchant caravans cut off or delayed. Supply of grain, fuel, and other essentials dropped sharply. prices inflated. Rumors spread about what the Mongols might do. Fear of raid, massacre, or plunder was real among non-combatants. Some sources described traffic jams at gates, overcrowding in mosques, and general unease. In response, Alauddin's visible preparations, fortifying walls, mustering troops, regulating markets, served not only tactical ends, but were also psychological to reassure the population, to demonstrate that the ruler was active, strong, and protecting them. Bahrani portrays Alauddin as a sultan who he woke up from his sleep of negligence once he realized how dire the threat was, reinforcing that prior to this Mongol advent, Delhi had been lax. Afterward, every effort was made to ensure citizens that order could hold. Putting it all together, the Mongol march into Punjab and toward Delhi wasn't silent or small. It was a large, methodical advance with high stakes. Delhi's leadership responded with a mix of military, economic, and administrative reforms. The city, in turn, entered a state of heightened fear and uncertainty. Markets tightened, walls were repaired, soldiers mustered. The psychological tension was as important as the military tension. How people felt, how confident or terrified the Sultanate made them feel, influenced how drafted troops served, how citizens behaved, how supplies were handled, and ultimately helped shape the outcome at Kili. As Qutlugh Khwaja's Mongols approached Delhi in 1299, Alauddin Khalji positioned his army carefully outside the plains at Kili. About 10 kilometers from Delhi's suburbs, Kili sat near the Yamuna River, giving the Sultanate a natural defensive edge on one side. This location let Alauddin deploy troops quickly, but the open plains also favored Mongol cavalry, making the battlefield both strategic and tricky. The flat terrain at Kili gave the Mongols a clear advantage. Their famous horse archers could move fast, shoot, and strike before the enemy could react. Yet the Yamuna River and dense bush on the other sides limited their options, which likely influenced their decision to camp there instead of pushing straight to Delhi. Historical accounts like those of Zauddin Bahrani describe Kili as bounded by river and bush, a mix of opportunity and challenge for both sides. Alauddin set his army with himself at the center. Trusted generals like Zafar Khan commanded the right wing, while Ulugh Khan and Nusrat Khan took key positions elsewhere. Smaller commanders and local forces filled out the rest. The Mongols arranged themselves for maximum mobility. Detachments could simulate retreats, while hidden units stood ready to encircle any enemy who advanced too far. Veterans of open plains warfare, the Mongols used deep lines of horse archers with reserves in the rear. Their plan was simple but deadly. Lure the enemy forward, then strike from the flanks and rear. It was a tactic they had perfected across China and Persia, and now they were testing it against Delhi. Accounts from chroniclers like Zauddin Bahrani and Amamir Khusra say the battle began with probing skirmishes. Alauddin Khalji knew he faced one of the deadliest armies in the world. He had around 70,000 troops, including Delhi's famous war elephants. The Mongols were seasoned fighters, used to breaking armies far larger than themselves. Alauddin's plan was simple: hold the line, keep the army together, and wait. He counted on the Mongols' long supply lines running short the further they advanced into India, but that plan demanded patience, and patience was not Zafar Khan's strong suit. Bahrani describes him as brave, ambitious, and hungry for glory, with a reputation for charging straight at the enemy, no matter the cost. Alauddin had explicitly warned commanders not to engage recklessly, yet at Kili, Zafar Khan saw an opening he couldn't resist. Across the plain, a Mongol contingent under Hajlak looked vulnerable. Zafar Khan gathered his cavalry and charged. At first, it seemed brilliant. His men smashed into the Mongol unit, scattering the vanguard. Dust rose, horses screamed, and the Mongols fell back in confusion. For a moment, it seemed the legendary horsemen might be bested. If the entire Delhi army had pressed forward, the Mongols might have reeled all the way back toward Punjab. But then came the Mongols' oldest trick, the feigned retreat. Zafar's infantry and foot soldiers couldn't keep pace, leaving his cavalry separated and overextended. Another Mongol detachment, possibly Tari's unit, blocked his return path, creating a deadly encirclement. The Mongols used light cavalry, mobility and terrain, bushes and open plains to lure him deeper into their trap. After pursuing roughly 18 kios, 55 kilometers, Zafar realized only about 1,000 cavalry remained with him. Yet he pressed on, with perhaps 5,000 to 7,000 horsemen surging into the Mongol center. But the Mongols were masters of deception. As Zafar Khan drove deeper, hidden reserves surged forward from both flanks. The Delhi cavalry found themselves encircled, their retreat cut off. What had looked like a rout was actually a carefully staged, feigned retreat, a tactic the Mongols perfected over generations. Zafar Khan and his men fought furiously, but they were swallowed in a tightening ring of arrows and lances. By the time he realized what had happened, it was too late. A fresh Mongol detachment had slipped in behind him, cutting off his return. Zafar Khan and perhaps 1,000 horsemen were trapped far from help. Was this heroism or recklessness? Many historical narratives treat it both ways. On one hand, Zafar Khan's courage is emphasized. He inflicted heavy losses. He resisted offers from Qutlugh Khwaja to surrender. You will be treated more honorably. Refused them and fought until his final breaths. His men stayed with him, though vastly outnumbered. He was surrounded, even his return route blocked by a Mongol unit, and died fighting on foot. On the other hand, many historians criticize the charge as tactically reckless. By abandoning his ordered position, Zafar Khan exposed his force. His cavalry outran his infantry, lost support from other wings, got isolated in the Mongol terrain. The feigned retreat, a well-known Mongol trick, was used precisely to lure him into such a trap. The extended pursuit left him vulnerable. Historians like Kishori Saranlal and Banari Prasad Sakena treat the charge as a violation of military discipline, blaming it for his death and the near disaster. To Alauddin watching from the main line, it was a disaster. One of the most debated points is why Alauddin Khalji did not send help when Zafar Khan overextended. Several sources suggest that Alauddin had expressly forbidden any commander from moving out of position without orders. He wanted to avoid fragments of his army being taken in separate fights. The overall strategy was delay. Wait for more units to arrive from the provinces, keep the main force cohesive. Zafar Khan's unilateral move broke that plan. Some chroniclers also hint at court politics. Ulugh Khan is accused, in certain later sources, 17th century work Zafarul Vali, of harboring ill will against Zafar Khan, and thus not rushing his wing to support him. Whether this is true or a retrospective smear is uncertain. Another reason may be practical. The size of the battlefield, the speed of communication, separation of forces, meant that even if Alauddin had wanted to send reinforcements, they might not have arrived in time. When Zafar Khan became isolated, the routes were likely blocked, and Mongol detachments were positioned to prevent re-entry. Also, keeping reserves intact might have been Alauddin's priority. Any reckless move could lead to the collapse of the whole army. Barani, in moralizing fashion, treats the lack of reinforcement partly as discipline, that Zafar Khan's refusal to follow orders justified Alauddin's decision. It serves the didactic narrative: obedience is at least as important as bravery. Alauddin's restraint is portrayed not simply as cold calculation, but as upholding royal authority and preserving the larger army. What happened next became legend. Isami, another chronicler, claimed Zafar Khan's men killed as many as 5,000 Mongols in the desperate fight. Even if that number is inflated, it suggests the ferocity of the clash. Outnumbered, hemmed in, Zafar Khan fought until his horse went down. Then he fought on foot, swinging his sword until he was cut down, surrounded on every side. By the end, his 1,000 horsemen had been reduced to just a handful. Some say only 200 survived. Zafar himself was dead, but not before inflicting grievous losses on the enemy. Yet strangely, the Mongols did not follow up with an all-out assault. Their commander, Qutlugh Khwaja, had been gravely wounded in the melee and would die soon after. Leaderless, the Mongols chose to withdraw. So, here's the question. Was Zafar Khan reckless, or could his charge have actually broken the Mongols if conditions were different? Let's reread the battle tactically. If Alauddin had committed his entire army at the same moment Zafar Khan pierced the Mongol center, the outcome might have shifted dramatically. The Mongols' feigned retreat only works when the enemy comes in piecemeal. A massed advance, Delhi's elephants in the middle, infantry pressing behind and cavalry sweeping both wings, could have pinned the Mongols before they had time to regroup. Timing was everything. From Delhi's camp to the Mongol lines was perhaps 2 to 3 kilometers of open ground, less than 10 minutes at a gallop. Once Zafar Khan broke through, Alauddin had only minutes to react, but he held back, fearing a trap. His caution meant Zafar Khan's force fought alone, isolated, until the Mongols could encircle them. Had Alauddin been bolder, or had Zafar Khan coordinated his strike with the rest of the army, the Delhi forces might have forced a Mongol retreat. The loss of Qutlugh Khwaja shows how close the Mongols came to collapse. With their commander killed and their center buckling, even the world's greatest cavalry army could have broken under the pressure of elephants, infantry, and a full Delhi line pressing at once. So here's the question. Did Zafar Khan's charge actually change the course of the battle? Barani thought so. In his chronicle, he wrote that the Mongols were so shaken by Zafar Khan's courage that they lost heart. He tells a story, almost mythical, that later, when Mongols refused to drink, the soldiers would say, "Do you see Zafar Khan?" It was his way of showing how fear of one man haunted even the fiercest warriors. But modern historians are more skeptical. Peter Jackson and others point out that the real reason for the Mongol retreat may have been something else entirely. Qutlugh Khwaja, the Mongol leader, was badly wounded in the fighting. Without their prince, the Mongol army couldn't press forward. Supplies were running low, and with Delhi still holding strong, they chose to pull back. Still, even if Zafar Khan didn't single-handedly force the Mongols to retreat, his charge mattered. It tied down Mongol units, it inflicted casualties, and it gave the Delhi army a story of valor to cling to. In a battle where the Sultan himself had chosen caution, Zafar Khan's reckless bravery stood out. After the battle, Alauddin Khalji didn't honor Zafar Khan as a martyr. In fact, some sources suggest he wasn't pleased with him at all. Disobedience was dangerous in a tightly controlled empire. But for ordinary soldiers, for chroniclers like Barani and Isami, Zafar Khan became larger than life. The general who charged the Mongols head-on and fought to the death. Over time, his story became a piece of Delhi's defensive myth. Against an empire that had crushed China, Persia, and Russia, India's defenders needed heroes. Zafar Khan filled that role. His last stand was retold as proof that the Mongols could be resisted even on the open field. Zafar Khan's sacrifice, combined with Qutlugh Khwaja's mortal wound, the Mongols stretched supply lines and Alauddin Khalji's careful defensive strategy created the conditions that made the Mongols turn back. Zafar Khan's charge was like one domino in a chain that ultimately saved Delhi from being overrun. Qutlugh Khwaja's injury, and according to some sources, his later death during the retreat, struck a huge blow to the Mongol force. Losing their principal commander disrupted their chain of command, lowered morale, and threw the army off balance. Chroniclers differ on whether he died immediately on the battlefield or while heading back to Mongol territory, but the effect was the same. The Mongols lost their main leader at a critical moment. This raises an important question. Was the Battle of Kili a true attempt to conquer Delhi, or just a raid meant to intimidate? Most primary and secondary sources suggest it was a genuine conquest attempt, Da sending his son Qutlugh Khwaja in command. The careful discipline to avoid plundering during the march, the precise deployment against Delhi, and the goal of forcing a decisive battle all point toward conquest rather than a simple raid. Still, logistical challenges, the distance from Mongol bases, and unexpected factors like Kutlugh's wound may have forced a retreat. So while the Mongols likely aimed to take Delhi, they had to withdraw, leaving the campaign's objectives unfulfilled. Modern historians debate this. Scholars like Peter Jackson argue that the Mongols intended to seize Delhi, but their leadership loss, stretched supply lines, and Alauddin's strong defensive measures caused the plan to collapse. Some suggest a hybrid interpretation. While conquest may have been intended, the campaign also served as a psychological test, probing Delhi's defenses, intimidating the Sultanate, and forcing Alauddin to show his readiness. Why does Kili matter? It marked the start of Delhi's Mongol problem under Alauddin Khalji, and showed why these steppe warriors, dominant across Asia and Europe, never fully broke into India. It also demonstrates how a single clash shaped by leadership, logistics, and perception can become a turning point in history. Heroism doesn't always win battles outright, but it can tip the scales. Zafar Khan's last charge bought critical time, inspired his fellow soldiers, and gave Delhi a story of courage to cling to. When we look back at Kili, we see two truths collide: the calculated caution of a ruler defending his capital, and the raw bravery of a commander who chose death over retreat. The Mongols would return to India many times, but Delhi would never fall. In that story, Zafar Khan's charge still resonates, a reminder of how one man's courage can leave a mark far beyond the moment. Thank you for staying with us through this journey into one of the most intense clashes in medieval India. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What surprised you most about Zafar Khan's charge, or about how Alauddin Khalji held Delhi against the Mongols? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and help us reach our next goal of subscribers. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in tomorrow's video for another story from history's battlefields.